Hello and welcome to the Newsroom. I am joined by David Maddock today. We're going to do this in two parts. First part is going to be on YouTube, second part over on the redmentv.com. David, thank you very much for joining me first and foremost. It's nice to have you back in the hot seat. Yeah. It's been a while, actually.
I think you should tell people where I'm from, by the way.
Why?
The newspaper that I work for.
Oh, it's Maddock Mirror. Everybody knows that.
I know, but
it's
Maddock Mirror. It's like I'm supposed to say when I do stuff like this that I work for the Daily Mirror. So.
And he does a fantastic job. And we're going to see the level of insight that he's providing to that newspaper over the course of the next hour, I'm sure. We're going to start off with some stuff. We're going to save the Shrewsbury stuff and the FA Cup stuff for the second part, because I think it's really interesting Wijnaldums' comments over the last couple of days. Obviously, he had an interview with Sky Sports News in the new blue training gear. I'm not asked. Has anybody asked about that?
Not really, no.
And he said, I'm just focusing on bringing this season to a good end. What would I like? It's difficult to say. It depends on what the club wants and how the situation is at that time. We will see. Liverpool is like home. And he's talking about the fact that, you know, his contract runs out at the end of next season. Mm-hmm. And I think most Liverpool fans would like to see him extend it. He's rumoured to be on only around about £90,000 a week. So the question of money comes into it. He's approaching 30 years old. I know, because you've just told me that he's your favourite player. What would you do with Gini Wijnaldum?
What I would do is what Liverpool will do, which is give him a new contract. But the key there was not the 90 grand a week, which I like the way you say, by the way, only 90 grand a week.
It's more than I've earned in the last 5 years.
No, exactly. It's like, what is it? That's almost £5 million a year, isn't it? It's like it's.
Oh well, when you say it like that, it sounds like a lot of money, David.
But the key was not that, but he's approaching 30 years old, and look at the way Liverpool do business now. They, when they're looking at contracts, they give contracts, they reward contracts for performance, but they also eventually look at sell-on potential. And the fact is that at 30 years old, you give him one more contract, then you get nothing for him. So you've got you have to be sure that player, for instance, if you give him a 5-year contract, he's going to be 35. Mm-hmm. And is he going to go on till he's 35? Now, they looked at Jordan Henderson and gave him a big contract. And I remember at the time there was this massive fuss. I don't know whether you remember. But they gave Henderson this 5-year contract when he was like 28. Mm-hmm. And everyone was going, that's too long. It's crazy. What are they doing it for? As it turns out, it was a fantastic decision, because now look at him as maybe he's up there with the great Liverpool captains now. I was going to say if they win the league, then that'll be confirmation. They're going to win the league. So he, therefore, has won the Champions League, won all these cups this season. He'll win the league as captain. It puts him up there with Souness, with Phil Thompson, with Emlyn Hughes. I would sort of relate him to Emlyn Hughes in terms of not always given the acclaim he deserves, but an incredible leader and a very, really sort of like lifting type of character. And yet a year ago, people were saying, what have you given him such a contract for? Now you look at him and think, yeah, well, not only will he lead this team for another couple of years, but he will pass on his experience and maybe do a Milner role then, So, perfect. They've got to look at Wijnaldum. He's a slightly different age. I suspect that they're talking to him about length of contract, not money. They'll give him the right money, but it's length of contract. You don't give him a 5-year contract. But obviously, if you're 30 years old and you're signing your last contract, you want it as long as possible, as high as possible, especially with the level that he's playing. But they've always come to an agreement with these players that are important. James Milner's an example. They've always come to an agreement with him, but they always leave it because he's of an age where you can't throw money around. Liverpool just don't do that. They're very careful, sensible, and they have this setup, don't they, now, where they're making long-term decisions as well as short-term decisions, and it works. And why change it? But he'll get a contract. He'll get more than £5 million a year.
And he does deserve it as well. I think he's one of the first names on the team sheet, isn't he? And whether it's Fabinho, Henderson, Wijnaldum, I like that as a midfield three. I know there's still rumblings from people occasionally that it's maybe not the midfield three that you want to see, but whenever Wijnaldum, Henderson, Fabinho play together, Liverpool seem to win, and that's something that obviously will be considered. There are other players in the squad though as well. You know, Adam Lallana's contract runs out at the end of this season, I believe. You've got Klein, who runs out at the end of this season. I know he's not on everybody's lips, but he would have been a good guy to have around this season and maybe spot Trent for a couple of games here and there. You've got Lovren running out next season. Matip apparently is running out next season as well. So Liverpool are entering this stage now where they need to start thinking about quite a few players and their long-term futures. And how do you see this going? I mean, Liverpool, I think, will have identified, and we spoke about this off camera a year ago. A year before we're talking about it, Liverpool will be talking about it. Is it going to be a La Masia style thing where we're looking at players who are coming through, or is it as simple as 4 out, 4 in, or somewhere in between? How do you think Liverpool will be approaching this period?
I think you know. Let's talk as a fan. As a fan, you can now trust that they're making the right decisions a long time ahead. They're making decisions almost like a year ahead, 2 years ahead even. So they'll be knowing that these players are coming up to the ends of their contract. And they'll also be knowing what level they're performing at, because the analysis that they're doing now, you know, they do the medical, they do all the checks. They know to within an inch of what their level of performance is and whether it's dipping and whether it will dip with age. They know all these things. So they'll know what sort of length of contracts to give, what you know, what players, what contributions they're making, because they're not just analysing opposition players. They're not just doing all that, the stats, the analytics, I mean, real-time computer simulations now of games, but it's for their own players too. Mm-hmm. So they know now. That's why, I mean, they've had injuries this season quite a lot, but they've managed the injuries really well because they've taken that to another level now. You know, so that they know when players need resting because they're doing it so well, and so you can almost, as a fan now, trust that they will. For instance, let's take Lovren, who a lot of the fans still dislike, but Liverpool know what his level is, and Klopp knows what his level is, and Klopp's trusted him this season, and he was outstanding when he was playing. He got injured. He knew he was close to being injured. They knew that. He had to play him, and then he did get injured. So they will now be saying, okay, his contract's up here. Is he as a third centre half, not first choice? Because clearly Gomez now and Van Dijk are the first choice, or even a fourth centre half. Are we want to give him a new contract? We want to give him the big money to be fourth choice, or are we now going to invest in a younger centre half? They've signed Sepp, who's got promise. They've got Hoover. They've got the lad who's gone out on loan, who I personally rate, although he struggled when he played it in the first half an hour against Everton, but he has got potential. So does the fourth centre half need to be someone who's on $100,000 a week, who's coming to the end of his career, or can one of those now, Hoover, I think particularly, maybe step up? And that's the sort of thinking that they'll be doing. So,
is there a tipping point here, do you think, for Liverpool, where they go, well, actually, you know, so let's use Nat Phillips as an example. He's fifth choice this season, which is why he's probably gone out on loan. If at fourth choice, is he going to get the game time to improve and really put himself in front of Jürgen, or is it better to keep Lovren around for a year, maybe keep Nat Phillips away, getting experience, gaining knowledge? At what point do you have to make that decision, do you think, or do you think that is almost rested on Lovren's shoulders?
Well, I mean, actually, this is, you know, what you're raising here is a really good example of what they've been doing already, because Lovren's still got more than a year left on his contract. He's got a year and a half left on his contract, I believe. So the decision doesn't have to be made until the following summer, by which time Sepp Vandenberg they'll have seen whether he is going to make the grade or not. Yana Hoover will be that crucially 18 months older in terms of physique, being able to manage the physicality of the Premier League. And of course, Phillips will have done 18 months playing at a much higher level. Hopefully they get promoted and he plays then in the Bundesliga 1. I mean, he's playing at a decent level already. So it could be that one of those then has stepped up at the end of those 18 months. And you can see the succession they're doing. They signed this young lad from Holland last summer who's gone in, but come and played some games, and played some first team games. He played a few in pre-season. So, you can see they're thinking 2 years ahead with him. Hoover, they moved into the first team squad very quickly, but knew that he's not going to be ready for 2 or 3 years. Again, he could be ready. And the same with Phillips. They've given him the perfect way to develop to possibly be ready. One of those, there's every chance that they could be ready. If not, then they maybe give Lovren another year's contract. So clearly the planning's there, and it's with Lallana too. They'll be looking at exactly the same. I suspect they'd like him to stay, and it might be that his decision is to go because he will just want to play some games.
And I say this all the time. I like players like that. It means that Liverpool are identifying the right characters when they sign these players in the first place. Because if a player wants to leave for footballing reasons, then that's brilliant, because you've had him around for footballing reasons, and he's not at your football club to just earn a pay packet and sit on the bench. He'll be 28, 29, maybe 30 years old, and he might think, I've still got this, I can play in the Premier League for 30 games a season. He'll back himself, because the other thing when you're talking about someone like Adam Lallana is his body going to stand up to it? Well, I try and put myself in the player's mind frame here, and it's very difficult for a lad who can't walk at the moment. You've seen me try to walk. But when you think about it, I'm like, how would I get through an injury and multiple injuries and come back and rehab? Well, you have to sort of go, it was unlucky, I was unlucky, and you have this little voice telling you you've just been unlucky again. When you get back, it'll be right this time. Otherwise, why would you keep going?
Yeah, well, I mean, Lallana's a great example of that, and actually, I mean, again, I've seen him get criticism, but he, like this season, look at him. He's come in. He's not got rhythm, but he's come in, and every time he's played, he's done a decent job for Liverpool. He's done a decent job for Liverpool. Liverpool are the best team in the world at the moment. That is the reality. Liverpool have dropped 2 points in the Premier League all season. Like, get your head around that. Maybe Manchester City were the greatest side in the Premier League. So I think possibly they were the side from 2 years ago. They dropped more points in that season than Liverpool have currently dropped this season. Liverpool are playing at a higher level than that Manchester City side. And Lallana is coming in and playing for that team and doing incredibly well. If he can play for that team, he can play for Real Madrid, he can play for Barcelona, he can play for Manchester City, he can play for any of those teams. So he's going, all right, maybe at those clubs I would probably get the same number of games I'm getting at Liverpool, but I could go and play for Tottenham and play a lot of games there. People, and it just going back to Lovren, it's the same with him. He played like 10, 12, 14 games, whatever, on the bounce, and was brilliant. And people have already forgotten that. So if he can do that for Liverpool, when Liverpool had literally not dropped a single point, in the Premier League, then he can do it at any club in the world. This is the level. And that's the thinking. Liverpool fans need to start thinking a little bit more like that.
What about thinking about the squad and how it's sort of been constructed over the last few years? I mean, the gaping hole for me is there's not enough 22 to 24 year olds in the squad now. What do you put that down to? And I'll give you some musings of mine. Jürgen's come in, he's got to change the squad, he's got to build a side that's successful on the pitch here and now, or in the very short term future. So the funds have been directed to making the squad be able to compete. While he's doing that, he's bringing in a few 17, 18 year olds like Kiana Hoover, Seth Vandenberg, and obviously we're seeing the likes of Harvey Elliott come at 16.
Yeah.
Do you think the resources just weren't there to be able to get those next in line in? Because it seems like there's a big gap. Kiana Hoover to Matip, Lovren, Gomez is an exception, by the way, because he's outstanding at the age that he is.
And I mean, you put Alexander Arnold in that bracket, even though he's younger than that, but his maturity puts him at that level. Actually, it wasn't for a lack of planning for Liverpool, because what you're forgetting is they've got Grujic in that category, Harry Wilson in that category, even Ben Woodburn in that category, Phillips in that category. So there's 4 players who And actually, I still think Grujic will come back because I think he is a class player. He's just maybe, I don't know whether he lacks a tiny bit of physicality or mentality. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think they're hoping he'll develop that still. But there's 4 players that they were grooming, and you know, I mean, you wouldn't write off Harry Wilson completely because he's played at a decent level and scored some goals. Just is he a Liverpool player? You know, because as we've just discussed, playing for Liverpool now, you've got to be the best in the world, not just...
8 years ago, he'd have been a Liverpool player.
Of course he would, yeah.
And the difference is Harry Wilson good enough to play for a Real Madrid, a Barcelona, a Liverpool nowadays, I suppose, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And 2 years ago, Klopp genuinely believed Woodburn would make that grade, and he's had setbacks, but, you know, possibly, maybe not now he's going to do it. He still thinks Grujic might, he still thinks Phillips might. So they were doing that, but when they are now looking to sign players, there's no doubt that's the age group they're looking to sign them in. We spoke beforehand about what they call succession planning, and Liverpool do that. They'll have charts, they'll be plotting it. They've got players' ages. They know their front 3 are all the same age essentially, and they're all at a perfect age right now. But in 2 years' time, you'll be thinking, are we going to have to replace them? So Liverpool won't leave it until then and go, right, put them
3 new forwards.
Exactly. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Bit like Manchester United did when they lost all those players when Fergie left. They'll be planning now. So they'll be looking to find players of that age group that can come in, maybe 21, 22, 23 possibly, who will come in, play games, get used to the style. I know we're going to talk about this. Get used to the style, get used to what the demands, settle down, and then eventually take over. And you can see it to a certain extent with the younger players they've signed now, like Harvey Elliott, like Jones, like even Hoover in the defence and stuff like that. These players are longer term, but around the first team squad, and will eventually replace the players that are there. But they will sign. They'll be looking at players who were, to be signing possibly this summer. They were looking last summer, but the players just not available. And so rather than waste money on players they didn't want, they're like, fine, our squad's great. We will wait and get the players that we really want.
So it does bring me on nicely, actually, to a podcast that I listen to. I've spoken about this over on the redmentv.com a couple of times over the last few months. Really been waiting to get my teeth into this topic. I thought you'd be the perfect guest for it. It was sparked by a show I did on the website, Stats and Tactics show. I think it was the Manchester City game. I got a comment from one of our subscribers, from James Leonard, who sent me a podcast from MIT Sloan Business Review. It was called Talent versus Teamwork. Yeah. It really is one of the best podcasts, footballing podcasts I've ever listened to. And it talks about essentially team chemistry and how MIT are trying to measure team chemistry in a football analytics sense. And so I'm going to read James's comment because I listened to the podcast and I couldn't say it better myself, and I'm not going to try, essentially. Yeah. So simply put, the more a team plays together, the better they perform. They broke down how the more minutes a team has in real game situations together, the greater their understanding of what they call the 3 Ps. Other players, their own position, and the programme that the team follows. There's a difference between knowledge and understanding. Knowledge can be gained quickly, but understanding comes with time. As players come in from different teams, they have an understanding of how to play that is based on different players, a different position, and a different programme. As they learn from Klopp and the team, they gain knowledge, but under pressure, long-term memory wins out over short-term memory every time. Understanding is gained over time by having opportunities to apply your knowledge in high-pressure situations until it becomes natural. I thought this had so many parallels with how Jurgen Klopp manages Liverpool. Fabinho and Robertson are perfect examples of a player being allowed the time and space to develop understanding before their true potential becomes obvious. The second parallel is in Klopp's preferred big game midfield. It's pretty much guaranteed to be Fabinho, Henderson and Wijnaldum. There have been many shouts for Keita and Ox to supersede the current setup, but Klopp obviously feels that the understanding that our go-to midfield 3 have developed over a few seasons of extremely high-pressure situations has a better chance of success in big games than players that may not have had the chance to develop that understanding yet. I will put the link to the podcast in the description as well. So team chemistry, to sort of summarise, let's talk about the front three, that's what we were talking about. Let's say Mo Salah leaves and you put one player in.
Yeah.
It's not just the front three that he's got to work with. It's not a guy who's got to work with Firmino and Mane. It's also how he links in with Trent, how he links in maybe with the 8 or the 6, how he reacts in different situations, where his movement is as opposed to where Salah's was. So not only has that guy got to understand what everybody else is doing, every player in the side, from Trent, from Alisson to Mane, also has a new dynamic in the side. And actually, we may have seen that in Minamino against Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
In that, a lot of times I saw him running through, or against Wolves, you could see him run through, but the ball wasn't given to him. And I wonder whether that's because they weren't expecting where the run was going. Whereas if Salah's there, everyone knows what Salah's going to do.
Yeah.
Most of the time he's pointing. It makes it quite easy. How what do you feel about that? And is it something, do you think, that Liverpool are trying to analyse?
Absolutely, Liverpool are trying to analyse it. I mentioned about real-time analytics, which is essentially using artificial intelligence to be able to analyse games as they're going on and use the information during the game. Liverpool, I read recently, Liverpool are very close. They're working with a company in France who have who have been developing this technology for some time, and they are very close to perfecting it. It could happen within the next year or so, and Liverpool are already doing that. So they will be able to look at games, look at movement patterns. And we've spoken on this show in the past about how Liverpool are using like particle physicists now, atomic scientists, to understand the actual spatial movement of football and players, and understand where they move and how, because it all seems so random, but like particle physics, it isn't. And I may be going slightly above the understanding of the average football fan here, but to sort of bring it down to a more understandable level, they will be able to see where spaces open up and why, both in Liverpool's team and the opposition, and then exploit where they're opening up in the opposition and fix their own issues in real time. You already see Klopp sprinting down the tunnel at half time. It's because he's getting all the analytics they've done in the first half. And then he needs time to formulate it and put it into a language the players can understand. So absolutely there's that, and Liverpool are absolutely doing that to a much higher level than
what we're
perhaps James is talking about here. But what I would say is I agree totally with him in that all teams do actually develop over time, especially if you're building a young side, because they learn together and they come together. But with Liverpool, I think it's even more the case, because Liverpool's system is actually more sophisticated than a lot in terms of Klopp has Klopp's tactics are based on a press, but it's what he calls an instinctive press. So it's not, here's a blackboard, when this person has the ball,
that.
These three people do that. It's just not that. It's actually, he always has a press leader. The press leader just instinctively knows when the situation demands the press. He goes, and then everyone else in the side has to take that trigger, know it's a trigger, and then also follow. And the problem is, if you're coming into the side, you just don't have that instinct. You don't have that. You don't understand the trigger.
You say instinct, but it's not, is it? It's a learned.
Well, it's learning, but it has to become instinctive. That's why I use the word instinct. It has to become automatic rather than instinctive. So yeah, it's learning it, but it is. And I think Naby Keita has struggled even now. He's been there a long time, and he seems slow in picking up that. And maybe that's why we've not, probably with the injuries, not seen that much of him. And with Minamino, undoubtedly. And actually, I was going to say, I bet people, when we were talking about that sort of age group, the sort of 21 to 24 age group, they were screaming at home, going, what about Minamino? And of course, that's a perfect example. They waited for him, got him at the right price. Brilliant price, great player, will take time. If he develops, could easily fit into one of those succession positions, and in the meantime will undoubtedly, because his running stats are immense, by the way, so he will do an amazing job. But it could take, like Fabinho, 6 months to fit into learning not just the systems, but that trigger.
And that's what James is saying. There's a difference between knowledge and understanding. You can sit in a classroom and learn all you want about Liverpool's system, but you can't exact what you need to do until you're in the team, until you see those pressing triggers. And it might be as simple as the left back receives the ball with his right foot or on his right foot, and that is enough to know that that's one of our triggers, for example, or it's a bouncing ball, or very, very simple pressing triggers that everyone can get their head around. But there may be much more difficult pressing triggers. I remember speaking to Klopp in the summer, and he was saying how he wanted to surprise people with the press this year, and I instantly thought about, at the time, okay, our front three move around. I wonder if we're going to see more of that from the midfield three, because you see sometimes Fabinho go from deep, and that's a surprising press. You've got Henderson there, Wijnaldum there, the ball carrier there, and the guy who's the deepest will go and press him. And you can imagine as a player, like, why is it coming from there? Why is it coming from that angle? So I find that interesting, the fact that now, if Fabinho goes, Jordan just drops in, or Wijnaldum will drop in, and the midfield will just change slightly differently for 5 minutes or until we get the ball back or whatever.
For me, it's a fascinating subject. I kind of love watching it, because I use the words with Liverpool sophisticated, because it's developed considerably. When Klopp first came in, he knew Liverpool weren't good enough, in terms of sheer quality of players. He knew that the only way they could compete at the top level was to do higher numbers in terms of ground covered, there's no doubt, and to have a press that was exhausting, a real intensive press, because it put sides under so much pressure. Obviously it put Liverpool under pressure, and because you can't do that for a full season without. Now they have such good players that they don't need to press like that. They can press in a very different way, and they do. Like as you say, they've developed ways, and they will at times understand when they don't need to press and just back off, and they do that late in games a lot now, where they just manage games now. But at the same time, they suddenly will just boom, go, and that's where I think it needs to be. Instinctive, automatic. Everyone needs to know, because there'll be a trigger, and the player will say, right, this is the moment, and then bang, the whole team goes. The whole team has to go, otherwise the opposition beat the press. And when you can do that to sides like Manchester City, as Liverpool did earlier in the season, and surprise them with their quality on the ball, then that shows that it has become so sophisticated. But the downside of that is, coming into that, it's hard. It's so hard, man. Look at Fabinho. When I watched him in his first, I watched him in one of the pre-season friendlies. Who would it have been? What Italian club it was?
Torino, maybe?
Yeah, it was season? Torino, yeah. And I thought, oh my God, they've signed a pup here. He looks absolutely terrible. But actually, what he was bewildered. He had no idea where to go. And I think Minamino looked a little bit, not bewildered, but he looked a little bit uncertain, to the extent that when he was getting the ball, against Wolves particularly, and even against Shrewsbury, he was like just being safe the whole time, because he wasn't quite sure where the movement was coming in, what to do, whether he should go alone or whether people were going to be following him, whether he, because he didn't want to get isolated and lose the ball. So he's like, I'll just be safe. But obviously he's not going to be safe. Eventually he's going to be brave and do the things that Klopp wants him to do. Fabinho was played so safe that it was like, oh my God, he can't play. Turns out he was just learning.
I remember, I think it was it? No, we didn't play against Burnley. Bury. We played against Bury, I think, that pre-season as well. And I watched him play, and I as I'm watching the games, I start to think about my stats and tactics show, and I'm looking at it and going, oh wow, he's dropping in between the centre halves. I wonder if that's how we're going to play. And I planned this whole thing out in my head while I was watching the game. And Klopp came out after him and went, he's dropping far too deep there. I don't know what Monaco were playing, but that's not how our six plays. And I thought, fucking hell, you just ruined my show there. I was going to do a big show on how Liverpool's six this season is going to drop into between the centre halves, and it was just all wrong, and he was unhappy about it. And those are the types of things that you see week in, week out. And, you know, I think not enough is given to our players, not enough credit is given to our players, whereby that automatic, instinctive, whatever word we're going to use, when it becomes like that, it's quick. And when you have to think about, I can imagine Minamino receiving the ball, right, where's Trent going to be? Trent's going to be overlapping here. And just that's enough on a football field to get you in a lot of trouble, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But, you know, you mentioned Fabinho, and I think it was a Torino game. I'm pretty sure he missed a penalty in that. And he's a guy who never misses penalties ever. And I think his brain was so scrambled that he misses, because he literally never missed a pen. But just on this, like, there's 2 points I was going to make, because as I say, it's just, I'm a bit obsessed with it. I'm like a right nerd when it comes to all this sort of like movement and tactics and stuff. Salah took a long time to learn it, and Klopp spoke to us a lot off the record about it, and he was saying, I don't want him to work back all the time. I don't want him to work like Sadio does, but I want him to learn the angles of positioning, so that he channels, when the opposition has a ball in his sector, he stops the ball going in one area and channels it to another. And it took Salah a long time to do that. But I saw against Wolves, and there was another game recently,
Manchester United.
United,
he was pressing the centre half. I'll tell you exactly when it was. Whoever their right centre half was one side of David De Gea, their left centre half was on the edge of the 6-yard box, and for some reason Luke Shaw was right by the corner flag, and I've no idea why. And Salah's right on the corner of the penalty area, and his first instinct, he was probably 10 yards away from Maguire who received the ball, and his first instinct wasn't to run at Maguire, it was to run 5 yards, 6 yards right, block the pass over to the left midfielder, I think it was Williams at the time, and take another angle in. And it probably took him twice as long, but we forced the ball into an area of the field where we wanted it. And it's that, and that Harvey Elliott can't do yet.
No,
Harvey
absolutely.
Elliott will take that run straight at the defender, and the defender's got an easy pass to the fullback.
And it's taken Salah a long time, but he's got it now. And it's interesting, because I've heard people saying, I'm worried about Salah, he seems off, he's shooting too much, he's doing this, he's doing that, he's not scoring enough goals. I absolutely guarantee Klopp is overjoyed with him, because his work rate has improved, but his intelligence, his positioning is absolutely spot on for that team now. It is unbelievable, and his positioning is still allowing him to just run all the time beyond defenders and cause these huge problems. He's probably at the height of his game under Klopp, I would say. I bet Klopp would say he's better now than he's ever been, even though he scored 715 goals in his first season. He will, honestly. And you mentioned Harvey Elliott, and I was also going to say the second point I was going to make is, of all the young kids at the moment, and I've written this, that Curtis Jones to me is the one who's ahead of the rest. Not because, he's got talent, he's got real talent, but watching him, he seems to understand it better than the other young kids. He's only 18, but he's just 19. He's 19.
The last time you were in, we were having this conversation outside as you were leaving, and I've made a point since then of trying to understand your point, and I 100% agree with you. He feels like he knows the role and his role and those around him much more so than maybe a Harvey Elliott or someone else. And I actually feel like that midfielder role that he's popped up in is much harder than what Harvey Elliott's being asked to do. Maybe that's my understanding, or lack of understanding I should say, but it feels like he's just system ready.
Yeah, I think he is. Yeah, I think and I think Liverpool's academy deserves huge credit, and they're lower they're sort of lower ages coaches and system. They deserve huge credit, because they now are working that. So they're getting, like for instance with Jones, he was playing central midfield. They realised he wasn't ready for that. Physically, he just wasn't ready for that. But he had the intelligence to play in a sort of wider position. And we've seen that he can do it, and he's understanding his work rate on the flank, coming inside, coming back, helping the fullback. It's immense, and his intelligence is clear. And Klopp said after he scored against Everton, he said, if all things go as normal, he will definitely be a Liverpool player. And that is, and he means his intelligence. He absolutely means his intelligence. Elliot is 16 still, so they're not putting too much on him at the moment because they want him to develop first as a player and then develop the understanding because he's got so much time. But at the same time, they're feeding him in and giving him the opportunity to learn. And it's again great credit to this succession planning, this forward thinking that they're now doing. And just a tiny little point. I'm sorry to keep going on, but you look at Williams, the right back. They have already in the junior sides got him to develop along the lines of a replacement or for Alexander Arnold, and he look, oh God, he's a mini Alexander Arnold. He's got all the same attributes. He's playing in the same way. That's no coincidence. That's because they've been working on it.
This isn't youth football playing a 4-4-2 and they come into the first squad and they're playing a 4-3-3 anymore. Yeah. And it's obvious, isn't it, at base level why you would do that. We're gonna zig and zag a little bit now. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the how you think Liverpool maybe identify players. Obviously it is the January transfer window. I didn't want to talk about transfers, maybe we've been linked with this guy or this guy, but how do you think that Liverpool go about identifying it? Because obviously analytics is going to be something that they're looking at. Now I know I listen to a lot of American football podcasts, and there was one Peter King did a while ago, a couple of years now actually, stuck with me, where he instead of interviewing the head coach, he interviewed a scout that worked for one of the sides, and I found it really interesting to hear how he would speak to high school teammates, high school coaches, college teammates, professors from his class, and really build up this understanding of the character of the player, and they put as much importance on that as they did on the analytics that the guys could see from wherever they are in the world. Yeah. Do you think Liverpool are doing that as well?
Do I think? No, I know they are doing that. It is 100%. And they're doing the analytics. They're doing it. On Minamino, they literally have been following him for 5 years since he arrived in Europe, and they have a bank of stats on him. They know his numbers. They probably even know his heart rate. I'll tell you honestly, they would know everything, again, there's a sophistication there because they've got a database of however many players they say 50,000 or whatever it is, but they also know where they're looking for players. So they know what characteristics they want, and they're looking for players. They'll go through their data and scouting, and they'll find players who fit what they want. Then they'll check to see whether they can do the job that is required. So Salah, they checked to see whether he could, his numbers were great. Then they check the character, and Klopp is massive on that. And but the club, it will become a club philosophy, not just Klopp, but Klopp is absolutely massive. And it's no coincidence that Klopp signs players who are great characters. He always says, I want them to be nice people, a nice person, a nice boy. He always calls them boy, a nice boy. And he wants them to be decent as well as being talented. And I'll give you an example. Fekir, right? They did all the scouting on him. He's a brilliant player. He's an absolutely brilliant player. He's technically unbelievable. It was going to be an amazing signing. There was an injury issue, but there were problems with his brother, who was interceding above the agent, started making more and more demands. And then Liverpool were talking, were trying to get to the bottom of the injury. They were wanting to speak to him, and suddenly he was cutting off. He wasn't speaking, and they got the impression that he was being too big time. He suddenly was making all these extra demands. He was getting people, intermediaries, to come in. He wasn't even speaking to his own agent. And in the end, I'm convinced it was that which caused them Liverpool to pull out of that deal, not the injury. I think they would have found a way to do the deal had he had the character of Salah or Mane or Jordan Henderson. he would be a Liverpool player now.
That's interesting, because what I'd heard was around how the ACL was rebuilt, so I've not heard that side of the story.
Well, that side is actually true, and funnily enough, the reason, I mean, I knew that, but his agent, who he then left, basically came out and confirmed all that quite recently. Yeah. And in fact, he's spoken about it on French TV. Eventually, he did, and that all that is true. And I think that tipped it. You've got two factors there, but that tipped it for Liverpool. And look through the whole side. I mean, I've been working in football for many years, and and it's understandable. Footballers can be complete arseholes, because from an age of like when they're still children, they're gods.
Yeah.
They get the money to go with it. They get the status to go with it. Everywhere they go, they have people worshipping them, adoring them. They're treated like they're superhumans, which in a sense they are. And they're not just not normal. And there's so many of them turn out to be utter, and I won't use the word, but actually, and Liverpool have had their number of those down the years. They've had some shocking characters, but all clubs have. And as I say, it's understandable. I'm not condemning them for that. I think I might be the same if I had that money and that level from such an age without forming a mature sort of mentality. Liverpool just don't have it anymore. The ones they've had have all gone, unsurprisingly, under Klopp, who shipped them all out with some good players but bad characters, and he got rid of them. And I can't think of any. I think Firmino got into a bit of trouble with a bit of drink driving once, but I think he's quite a nice guy. I mean, I do think he's a really nice guy, and the whole squad.
Saka was maybe the last that springs to mind.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure he went because Klopp didn't like his character rather than his talent. I mean, I wouldn't want to stand up in a court of law and say that, but I'd say that. I mean, Daniel Sturridge was a complicated character, and he's left eventually. Wasn't given a new contract, and Liverpool now almost through the whole squad. Alisson looks like he's this amazing guy. He's
Christian and Bobby.
I know exactly.
Everyone else is freaking out about the league, and they're having the time of their life, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, and it goes without saying, James Milner, Jordan Henderson, Adam Lallana. These guys have got. I mean, they're absolutely decent people. You'd love them to be your mate, because you know that if you had a problem, they'd be right there for you. You really do, and that it goes throughout the whole team. Mo Salah's one of the most famous people in the world now. He really is. In certain parts of the world, he's like he is without question. A god. And
on the front of time, wasn't he?
Exactly. Yeah. And yet he's a shy, amazingly quiet, lovely fella. Unbelievable, really. Yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to get into the second part of the show, and that'll be available over on the redmentv.com. Don't forget to check out at Maddock Mirror on Twitter and read his articles in the Mirror. They are always fantastic. Doesn't just cover Liverpool either as well. Cover quite a lot of the old Northwest, really, don't you?
Well, I had to go to City the other day. It was absolutely terrible.
Was it?
It was awful. It was against Fulham, and Jesus Christ, Fulham had the captain sent off after 6 minutes, and I was like, I might as well go home now. It was the most antiseptic, just ridiculously sterile game I've ever seen, because City just got into that Guardiola mode of passing and not playing football. So it's funny, actually, because just let me say this. I had a chat the other day with my sports editor, and he was saying how great Liverpool are, obviously, and he was going, brilliant watching them and City. And he says, I'd rather watch City still. And I was like, would you? Because sometimes City's quite soulless, Do
you know what it is with City? And I felt the same about peak Barcelona as well. What they do is unbelievable.
Yeah,
when they play football, it's unbelievable. Yeah. But it's the same every week.
Yeah.
And what I love about watching this Liverpool side is we can do the tiki-taka, we can do the long ball into the channel, we can high press, and we're built to beat every type of side that we're going to come up against.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love that different approach to the two footballing sides. look, don't get me wrong, if I was watching this Liverpool side play like Manchester City, maybe there'll be a tribalism thing. And I tell you what, we're going to talk about that in the second part. I want to do a big thing on social media and tribalism in football and talk about the Shrewsbury, however you're saying it, that game. So yeah, go over to the redmentv.com. Don't forget to check out Maddock Mirror on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching. Drop a like on the video and we'll see you over there.